Hey everyone, Sakurayasin here, and in this episode of Creating K, I thought it might be nice if I walk you through the process I use for creating the cell shaded images that you'd see in the Space Waitress K comic. Because I've already shown you some rendering techniques that I use on top of those images, but I thought it might be nice to show you kind of a rundown of my process in creating that, and something that you can use because I feel it's pretty effective to get images down or characters down fairly quickly. So this is not going to be about like a panel per se, but just a process for creating a character and the steps involved, but it is the same steps that I use when creating a panel. Now I'm using Clip Studio Paint because it's easier for me to record that and show you what I'm doing, but really I use Procreate, but I do also use Clip Studio often enough in work that it's pretty similar. So I'm going to go ahead and just walk you through it. So the first thing I'm doing is I have like a blue, I like to pick like a bluish green color to begin with for the roughs, and the reason is probably because of experience in animation or comic books where you use non-repro blue pencils to draw. And if you have like a pencil and in Clip Studio you click this like blue, it'll turn into that type of blue. Personally, that's not the blue I like, and I like it a bit more greenish and something more like that. And then I'm actually using a watercolor brush to draw. And you might be wondering, why are you using a watercolor brush to draw in the beginning anyway? And the reason is that I find it's just easier to make big shapes, and I want to make big shapes, and I want them to be not very like defined. I don't want it to be precise necessarily at this point. I just want to get the big picture down, and I find with bigger brushes I can do that. I can just, for instance, let's say I wanted to make her head, I could just take a big brush and do that, and there I have like a general placement for a head. Then I can look at that and say, well, how big is the body compared to it? How big are the arms? I can do all of this in one stroke and then evaluate that. And it's actually, for me anyway, it's easier to evaluate when I have these big forms down. So let's do K. And in terms of what her pose is gonna be, I don't think I'm gonna do anything too crazy. Let's get ahead. Let's just think about first an S. So here I'm just creating kind of like an S curve. So whatever I do with her, it's going to be more interesting as a composition just because of this, because I have this flow line as opposed to these lines on either side, which like you got straight in this rectangle. And by having something flowy here, whatever I do now will be somewhat influenced by that gestural line. So let's get like the head in here, body somewhere there. Let's push the hip out here. And at this stage, I'm super loose. I don't care about details or anything like that. And I'm very open to erasing or transforming, just doing whatever is necessary to make this work. I think it's very important to not be tied down to certain ideas like, well, it's got to be cool and it's got to be done perfectly right from the beginning, because it doesn't really. That's just something that can hold you back and make you feel like, well, I need to get it right away, but why? Especially if you're using digital, like why? I'd rather not constrain myself than constrain myself. So as I'm looking here, I can kind of see a figure in here, and let's say we're doing a full body, then I need to make it still smaller until I can kind of see the whole thing. So there. She's got her hand on her hip, and then the other one down. So something like this. So now that I have this, I have a general idea of what's going on. But it's only general. It's very vague still. So I'm actually going to take this and then reduce the opacity so it's even harder to see. But you can kind of see it. I'll make it a bit darker just for the video. And I'm going to make a new layer. And now I'm going to switch from watercolor to just a pencil. And for size, like 70 pixels is pretty okay for me. This image itself is 2500 by 3300 pixels in dimensions. So, and I'm going to go a bit darker and a bit more blue. And I'm going to try to establish this with a bit more detail. Maybe the body's actually kind of turned this way and the head's turned this way. So I'm not doing, again, nothing's really specific. It's kind of getting more specific each time, but I'm not dealing with, what do the eyes look like? What are the details of this? That's not what I'm dealing with right now. I'm just dealing with basic shapes. And for the torso, I like to use this type of shape here, which is kind of like a wedge. It's like this, I guess. And that kind of, for women anyway, it's kind of describing the rib cage, and then can put the torso from there. So there's that. Like coming there, this one here, and I'm allowing myself to sort of look at this general shape and see something within it. Okay, and there. So again, if it's, I'm not adhering perfectly to it at all. I'm just changing it and altering it and making it work. So here's, for instance, this arm is way too big. So I don't have to stick to that. I can adjust it. So when I draw arms, what I like to do is actually not do what I just did. I like to get the hand where it's going here, for instance. And then I get the shoulder position. So now I have hand, shoulder, and I do this like squiggly noodle shape, I guess. And let's see, this other hand goes like about there. Here's a shoulder squiggly line, and then I can fill in the blank. So here, then I go from this shoulder to this hand, create that line, then I look at this shape, and I think, roughly what's a halfway point, like about there. That's where I'll put the elbow, and then I sort of fill that in. And I'm going to flip to get a sense of, what things are looking like proportionally. Is anything super wonky? It's okay. So now I have, roughly where her head is. Now I want to describe the front plane of the head as soon as I can, because that'll help me to see, what direction is this head facing. See, if I put it here, that's saying one story, but if I did this, it's kind of like she's looking down. If I did this, it's like she's looking up. So kind of think looking sort of up is okay, and to the side. And I'm creating a kind of an interesting shape like this for the head, like this, with that crosshair thing. And that's okay. So I actually know from experience that this head is too small. You might be thinking, well, it looks pretty big to me. But for the style of Kay, the heads are quite big compared to the body, so more like that. And then the necks are quite skinny. So something like that. And now I can kind of get more of the details of the face in terms of where the the eye line would be, and it's pretty low in this style, and then the hairline and things like that. But this is like the second stage. So the first stage I was kind of doing it at 70 pixels. Now I'm gonna move down to 20, but I just want to get her general hair shape because that's very important for Kay. She has such a distinct hairstyle that it kind of defines her. So there we go. And I've drawn her so many times that I'm quite familiar with her design, so I don't need like a reference. But if you're drawing a character and you're not really sure what they look like, I would say this is a good time to pull out the reference and have that off to the side. So I'm not really liking the way this arm is going because it feels like it's too flat, and I want it coming at us more so we get more three-dimensionality here. All right. And I'm using the eraser kind of like a drawing tool here where I'm allowing it to block out big shapes. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is that initial layer that I made with the, like this one, I can lower the opacity even more. I still want it to kind of bleed through because I found that if I'm just working like this off a blank thing and I start drawing, it's very hard to, like, it's easy to get lost and not know where anything is. But if I even have a very light structure to build off, it can help a lot. So I'm actually feeling this is a bit stiff. I'm gonna see if I can just, let's see if I can do this. I'm gonna use a mesh transformation. I'm just gonna try to, if it lets me, add a bit more of a gesture to this. So again, I'm very open to using whatever tool gets the job done. If this helps make it more energetic, that's good. So that's looking a bit better to me. Okay, so then here's this layer, and I'm going to lower the opacity of this one too now. So about there is good. And you'll see I'm just building this up slowly, right? Piece by piece. So now I'm going to get a bit darker and bluer, and I'm going to move to about 20. And here I can kind of start putting in more details because I have so much information down already in terms of the proportions, like the general proportions, that I know it's mostly going to look okay. So I'm zooming in a bit now, and let's put in some more information, like details about the face now. You can kind of see the lines underneath the plane that shows like this is the front plane, and so I might need to make this head a bit bigger, but let's just see. again, I'm allowing myself to be really rough. And when I drew the eyes, I didn't really draw the eyes. I kind of drew eye sockets, and I didn't make them like equal like this either. You'll see one is kind of like this, one is kind of angled to get that feeling of, actually they're both slightly angled, but to get that feeling of like a 3D form. There's the nose. And the mouth, yeah. It looks like it's going to be a bit small for a head. So I'm just going to select that and make it bigger. And if you're used to just normal proportions, this might look very off, but it's actually something you get used to as you do these styles, is how stylized they really can be. I'm going to be flipping a lot, so I hope you don't get dizzy, but and I actually want the eyes to be lower than that. Guess I've tilted her head a bit down, but I think that kind of works better. So now I have like a general placement for certain things: the eyes, the mouth, the nose. Can get her eyes in there. So Kay's eyes, they have a very particular shape. They kind of go like up, and then they go this way, kind of straight, and then they go that way. Like that. Then you get the eye there. So that's a general shape I'm going for. Doesn't have to be perfect at this stage, but it has to be pretty close. So I don't know if I want her looking, I guess it's better if she's looking at us. So I'm filling in the eyes. So Kay's eyes are not black, but the way I do eyes is I'll get the basic, like first I'll get the eye socket, then I'll get the basic eye shape. And I tend to just sort of scribble in the shape of the eye, because then if they're light colored, I can always erase or draw on top and get that exact shape. But it's easier for me to have the eyes kind of build up almost sculpturally, and then I can see the character looking at me, and I can also see it's easier to see if there's anything off about it, which in this case there is. This side of the face is not right, so and I need those eyes to be a bit more slanted because she has very, very slanted eyes. And then she has her heart tattoo things, cheek tattoos. And again, erasing is not a problem. The problem would be leaving something on that's incorrect. That doesn't feel or look like the character you want. That's the problem, not erasing and fixing it. So if you've got an idea of what your character is supposed to look like, then you want to make sure you get that. And I think the head's still a bit too small. So this comes down, go like that, go like that, get that. And now she has kind of like a shaved part of her head, and then the part that comes up, it comes around like this. And this part goes like that. going to make it bigger again. And she has a pretty long neck, but a lot of that gets obscured by her collar, because she has this collar thing. So once I put that in, it'll start to not look nearly as long, the neck, I mean. So it's quite amazing how if you have a base, you don't need to worry so much. Like things just get so much easier because I'm not thinking about, you know, much in terms of proportion. I just get to put down the forms a lot more quickly. And again, I'm not sticking 100% to anything I'm doing. If it needs changing, it'll change. But I'm allowing things to be loose, and I'm forgiving any mistakes I'll make so long as I fix them. Like, that's the only mistake, is leaving it there. But otherwise, it's okay. So let's get her sleeve, kind of comes over her, or her cuff comes up. You get this part. And this is fabric, so that's going to be looser. And then we have like a, I don't know what you call it, but it comes out like this. All right. So the side of her face is very tricky to get right. And sometimes I get it pretty quickly. Right now, not so quickly. So I'm just working it. Because it's just so specific. If it's slightly off, it looks just wrong. I think her entire head needs to, her face, I mean, needs to come down a little bit there. And that's okay. Now this part of her hair is kind of coming over. I tend to make the hair a bit too big at times, so I'm gonna try to keep that a bit more sensible. It's only a bit more. We have her hair doing this, comes over, and then it falls down like that. All right. Now let's get in the legs. I'm not worrying too much about the clothes in terms of where they break yet, like the shoes or, you know, parts that pop out too much. That's there, but it's not, you know, a big deal right now. And probably here, this part might show. Here, get a bit of the hand showing. Knee. Thinking more about the anatomy than about like clothing right now, but I am trying to get the basic shapes in. This foot looks wrong. So erase and try again. It's a bit better. This like actually feels like it needs to be moved down a bit, but I'm not sure. Guess so. Not a huge fan of the face. I don't know. I guess must be struggling extra hard just drawing it, because normally I don't have this much trouble with drawing the face, but I'm also not very good at drawing things and talking at the same time. So yeah, I don't mean to just make excuses, but I'm gonna try anyway. even if it doesn't look so great, I'll try to get it decent. All right. And there you saw I just took like an eraser, made it big, and kind of knocked everything back, because I don't want to completely erase everything. I just want to get it down to the point where I can start to like make adjustments and have something there to compare against. So I want the ears a bit higher. And this comes down like that. And there. All right. It's a bit better. Okay. So now I can start adding more of the clothing details and whatnot. So with her design, I have with the collar and these parts, I tend to break it down into like, they have lines on them, and I tend to put 3, like usually 1 here and then 1 there and 1 there. Odd numbers just tend to look better. So that's kind of how I deal with it. But then here I put 5 on this area. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And here I'm getting some occlusion behind there. All right, so we've got that. Get the her pants, or like yoga pants kind of. Get that going, and then her shoes. So you saw I kind of was gonna do this, but that's not really describing necessarily the form of her leg accurately enough, because it kind of comes forward, then you get the shin bone, and then it comes more back. That's a bit more accurate. Then we got the shoes here. Man, having the basic foot placement anyway makes it a lot easier. This comes around, because then I'm just kind of like thinking of where the shoe would go and putting it in. All right. Now this is feeling a bit too fat. So it's a weird style with long legs and stuff. That's just how it is. You can make it, obviously, whatever you're making, and when you do it, you should make it according to that. So I'm not saying this is right or anything. I'm just saying that's the way it is. So I'm gonna just reposition her to about there, and this arm is looking long, so I'm gonna go ahead and just erase that. Again, if there's something wrong, just fix it. Like right as soon as you notice it, just fix it. You don't want to be noticing it and then putting it off, or thinking like, oh yeah, well, I knew the arm was off, I just, for whatever reason didn't want to fix it. It's like, no, just get it over with. All right, so that's like stage, what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4. Stage 4. Oh, this stage is nothing. So 1, 2, 3. So now I'm going to go ahead and, again, lower the opacity of all those layers underneath. So now I can see through again. And at this point, I can do one of two things. So for myself, this is more than enough to just go ahead and start inking. But if I was unsure of what I was going to do, I might do another pass and sort of figure things out more. But I think inking is the way to go from here. So to ink this, again, I normally use Procreate, and I use a brush called Dry Ink in Procreate. And this brush, G Pen, is pretty much the closest equivalent I've found. Maybe Real G Pen is a bit closer, but it's a close equivalent to that brush. And I use black to ink, just easier. And I go very slowly, you'll see. And so what I like to do after I get the drawing in place is I color code my layers. So red for me is always ink. Orange is when I use the shadows for a multiply layer. Purple is my flats, and I tend to just have that red, orange, and purple. So let's start. I like to start on the eyes because it makes it feel like I get the character down. And with K, you actually don't draw this bottom section. You just kind of skip that. And the eyelash and the, what do you call it? The iris kind of join. So yeah, it's very, very slow. She has like V pupils. And let's get this eye in. So because I have all this information down, I can get the shapes in much, much easier. Like if I didn't have all these layers underneath that I had worked off to create that foundation, and I was just thinking like, well, that's what her eyes look like. I've got a blank page of white, and I need to somehow get all this right. It's going to be a lot more difficult to get right. So I guess going easy on yourself, in my view, can help a lot, not giving yourself unnecessarily difficult tasks. And there's a lot of unique shapes, like with her eyebrows, they're a very specific type of shape. If I'm having trouble making a line, I rotate, which is I just hit the R key and then can rotate. With these tattoos on her cheeks, it's just very important that I try to make them look three-dimensional, that are going around the contour. I didn't like that one, so I'm going to redo it, and actually I'm going to flip it. And I'm not really concerned with making beautiful lines here, like these nice flowy lines. I used to do that actually for the characters. I really tried to get these like nice lines, but I found that the lines, the eye kind of just slides off these flowy lines, although they're really pretty. And I found that when I use actually interrupted lines like this, it creates more of a interesting look. My eye gets stuck and I kind of, I don't know, I follow it more. It's, I guess it's a personal taste thing, but that's how I've started to do it. So instead of doing like a nice clean boom, or boom, boom, I'll actually slow down and make almost hesitant lines. It's almost like, I remember Bob Ross mentioned something like this when he was talking about, I don't know if it was painting trees or something, that it helps to have kind of a wobbliness to your lines. Like overall, I'm still trying to make them fairly clean, but I'm adding a bunch of subtle variation by doing it this way. So again, just I can zoom in and I don't have to worry because I know generally everything is in place. Everything's working. And I can add little subtleties to the lines like that to show that the hair is growing out. Probably stuff people aren't really gonna notice, but I think it's not bad to add in. That felt too big, so I'm gonna trim that down a bit. And then for the hair, I actually put in like these vertical lines over the shaved part of the head. And I sometimes do that with the eyelashes as well. I get some like vertical lines going down like this. But it depends. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I guess for this one, I'll leave some in. Okay, now for the hair, the hair's always tricky for me, and I tend to mess up on it. But let's see. Oops. So I actually want all this variation in the line. It'll make the lines a lot more entertaining for a viewer to look at. And it's something I'm trying to do more and do more consciously. And then like how much of the hair to detail is always something I'm working on trying to get better at, because I don't want too much but too little and it doesn't really show the form. So finding that balance is the tricky bit, so you still get sort of an appealing shape, but it also describes how this hair is like kind of flowing. And then I'm thickening up some of the lines here and then back here to show, you know, there's some occlusion happening, as light's going to have a tough time getting in to these. And that's what occlusion is. It's just, you know, light's not having an easy time getting inside an area, so you get it darker. All right, so let's get this color. So for the color, I really have to think about the three-dimensional shape of it, not just like I don't just put it in randomly. I have to think about how this, what part's coming forward, what part goes back, what part goes down. This part probably went out like that. When it comes around here. And it's getting squeezed here. And comes around. Maybe this folds in on itself. And then I have those lines which will help to, they're kind of contour lines, the seams that'll help to show the form of this. This comes around, goes in, comes out like that. All right. So get this shoulder in. And try to make sure, I'm trying to make sure I get, variation in the lines and that it works. Like, where you put the variation does matter in terms of lines. Usually you want it like heavier on the bottom. You want thicker lines on the bottom of an object. So let's say you had a cylinder like this. You would want it like thicker on the bottom and then thinner as you go up. But it doesn't always have to be that way. Sometimes it's whatever's closest to you gets darker. So I think just having variation is important in a way. You almost like having something where it's darker. So long as it's not even, that's pretty much the worst thing you can do is just make it so all the lines are absolutely even. It's very boring. You want it to have like variation. All right. And for the outside lines of a thing, like the external lines, I actually want to make sure I don't make broken lines like this because it makes it, like see here, because it makes it a pain to color. It's okay if the internal lines are broken, like if that line was broken, that's not a big deal actually, because this whole thing is one color. But if the external lines are broken, that can be a bit frustrating. And it was it's very liberating to realize that I could actually make mistakes and it looks better in a way. Because I spent a long time trying to get good lines, but then I also saw that certain people just had better lines and I didn't know exactly how to do them because it wasn't like they weren't always really nice and flowy, but they just felt cool. And I think there's a time and a style for each case where sometimes you really do want it to be very flowy and cool and like clean like that. But it's like, oh, you can have a shaky hand and actually get a nice result. It's kind of interesting. So here we want wrinkles in the fabric. And this is going over the hand. So the hand's kind of like a, sort of like, I'm thinking of it rectangularly, but like that shape. So I'm not doing, I'm not just doing like a shape like that, like something super round like that. I'm actually making it a bit flatter. Now with the fingers, I'm focused more on the outside silhouette than the inside one. And I'm okay with broken lines. I just want to make sure these outside parts are sort of filled in. It should look okay. So don't like those lines at all, and I will fix them. So you might wonder, like, is it really important to get all the little things in perfectly, like if your lines are off? And I think the answer is yes. It might not be like absolutely necessary all the time that things are that way, but the thing that happens is if you get used to just making sure things are at your a level that you're satisfied with, it kind of improves your overall quality, I think. And for this, I want to get the lines going, these seams following the form again. I'll just have it go around that. And this top still has thickness, so I want to get some of that indicated, that this does have a side plane. And it comes down, and then it gets thick here. I don't know why my shortcut keys aren't working, so I keep having to manually switch the pen, but these things happen, I suppose. Sorry if I'm going quiet. It's kind of kind of hard to draw and think for me. Definitely not a social artist. I know I said I wasn't going to do those big sweeping smooth lines, but sometimes it's just easier that way. So here I'm trying to get the form of the knee. Go around, get that. And that. And I'm not just tracing the lines at all, because if I was, first of all, it would be a lot more boring to draw. And second of all, that would imply that they're good or good enough, which I don't think they are. So it's always like try to improve the lines, try to add something to it. At each stage you're adding, you're not just like cleanup shouldn't be this this mindless I just trace what I drew already so that it's inked. It should have its own I don't know, point. Like there should be a point to it where you're improving things, not just tracing them. So for these lines, I just want to feel the form underneath. And by making it thick to thin, you can get it where you can kind of feel those lines. But if you get it wrong, you don't. So I want to get it right. All right. And I'm kind of looking down at these shoes, so I want to keep that in mind as I'm drawing them. There's a thickness that's going to show, and that we're going to be looking down on these forms. And this symbol that I'm drawing is on a lot of the the clothes, it's going to be revealed more about what it is and what it means. But for now, it's just something that are on lots of clothes. In a lot of cases, I keep the silhouettes pretty clean. It's the internal lines that are a bit more messy at times, but the silhouettes can be fairly clean. All right, so I guess that's it for the line section of it. I think some of these lines could be thickened up just to match the ones below. They're a bit thin by comparison, so it's gonna go and add a bit of line width, especially to this arm because it's coming forward. So like this area should be darker, more thicker, I should say. The line be thicker because it's coming towards us, and then this is coming towards us. So at the elbow, it should be thicker, and then it should get thinner as it goes back in space. This is looking strange. So this is coming in front actually, and then it goes like that. Does it? Here I'm getting confused. Sometimes I confuse myself and then I get very lost for a while. Because it feels like this is coming one way and then it flips and then it's doing something else. I think I've confused myself. If I dwell on it, I'm gonna spend too much time just worrying, and it might be important to fix, but it might not be. So, but I can't see it yet. So, one of the things I might do, if I wasn't doing this live, is I might take a break right now and then come back and see. Wait, what have I done? But I wanted to do this all in real time. So let's just see what we can do. So again, just looking for certain areas where the lines could be a bit more beefed up. All right. So once the lines are done, what I do then is turn off these underdrawn lines. And now I have this. And now what I want to do is isolate the figure. So what I'm going to do is in Clip Studio, I'm going to hit this set as reference layer. And I think it's a lighthouse. I think that's what it's supposed to be, a lighthouse. Click that. And then I make a new layer underneath. And I'm going to make this one the purple layer for flats. And generally, here I have a color set that I use. These are the colors I use for Kay herself. So I just made a little swatch. I have this in Procreate as well. So I just kind of replicated it. it's kind of hard because I know what all these colors are, what they mean, but it might be difficult if someone doesn't know. So they're just the colors that are on her. I'll be using this, but I generally use like this yellow color for a background. You'll see. So maybe for K I'll use the orange though. So what I do now is I select around the figure, and I'm basically selecting the background, not the figure itself. So now I've got all that. Look to see if there's anything I'm missing. No, it's a pretty simple silhouette. And then I hit Shift Control I, which inverts the selection, and I fill. So now I have this filled, and it acts as a mask. And for the background, let's not worry about it just yet. So then I either have one of two things. I can work on the flats and then put in the shadows, but I actually like, especially lately, I like to put in the shadows first. And change my mind, I'm going to make it yellow just for this stage. One of the reasons I don't like to make things, I usually make my things yellow, but one of the reasons I don't like to do it for Kay is because she has yellow eyes and it gets a bit annoying. But it's just a tiny part. You can make it any color you want. The important thing is that usually for flat coloring, you want it a color that's not on the figure themselves. So now what I'm going to do is make a new layer, and I'm going to clip it down by hitting this Clip at Layer Below button. And now whatever I paint is going to stay within this this boundary. See? Stays within that. It's clipped down to that yellow layer. And I'm going to make this layer orange and put it to multiply. Now, for shadows, I use these two colors, one of these two. And in Procreate, I use a hard brush here. I'm just going to use watercolor. And I'm going to add the shadows. So this is a very simple style, so I tend not to do like the shadows I do for painterly stuff where I actually, want to get, like these types of shadows where you get the shadow side and light side and everything. I tend not to go too realistic with it because it doesn't really help. I feel like sometimes it's okay, but it creates such a mood that it has to justify its mood. So just gonna use this and get kind of big shapes in. And don't be afraid to block large areas into shadow. That's shouldn't be a problem. And because I'm using the watercolor here, I can actually get some nice transitions. It looks like this, like if you press hard, it's like that, but then if you ease off, you can get some pretty nice smooth blends, and then if you can like go over it and smooth those out further. So it's pretty nice as a brush. So then the whole neck area, this area be in shadow. I like to put a shadow in the eyes, and then the eyelashes cast a shadow onto the eyeball. The ear gets a shadow. Part of the hair. Again, I make the brush big sometimes to get big areas of shadow in, because it looks better when you have like large areas of shadow. It helps to group things. Okay, like that. under the arm, there's going to be a shadow. And the boobs are going to have a shadow as well. All of that. I kind of do like a formula with shadows and where I place them now. Just because for comics, it's not really like you're making an art piece per se. You just want the figure to read. And so you put the shadows in the place where the figure gets the most readability, unless you're going for a specific mood. Then you put the shadows where you'll get the mood conveyed. So I think of the planes of the fingers and put the shadows in corresponding to that. And then for the abs, I generally like to put a bit of detail in, but subtly, so like that and that, so it feels like you can feel those abdominal muscles there. And that's just thinking about, you know, where to put the light and kind of leaving it so there's like a light there and light there and then shadow, light, shadow. Okay. And the reason I said I like to do this before I put the flats, first of all, I don't know, it feels easier to do things in certain orders, but it's nice to have it where I can not worry about color at all, and I'm just worrying about where the lights go, where the shadows go. So I like to do it for that reason. And then when I do it this way, the most boring part is probably just filling in the flat colors. So by leaving that till the end or near the end, for me anyway, it makes it a bit more tolerable, because then I know, like, once it's done, I'm done, and then yay. So I'm putting this leg, because it's a little bit further back in space, I'm kind of exaggerating that, just knocking it back into shadow. It wouldn't necessarily be that much in shadow, but tends to not look too bad. If I want, I can like add areas of light where it might hit, like that, but generally don't mind pushing it into shadow. With the lower legs and feet in general, it's not necessarily bad if they just end up going to shadow, because you don't want too much attention there usually. That. And then I can look for like areas where there might be small shadows, like the rim of this sweater. All right. And actually the whole side of this face could get a little bit of shadow, because it is turned, and I do want to convey that. Maybe some of these hair strands get delineated. All right. So the lines I use, here I use black lines, but actually my lines are not black. I use a dark blue, and the way I get it to be dark blue after I draw the lines is I just make a new layer above this red layer and I clip it down and I fill it with this blue color. And then I set the layer beneath to multiply. And it kind of looks black with the yellow parts, but once I fill in the colors, they're not like that. So that's that. And now I'm going to just put in the flats. So this layer is clipped down. I can turn on and off the shadows. I usually turn the shadows off when I'm doing the flats. And we can just go ahead and start filling in the flat colors. And I mean, pretty much after that it's done. One of the things I sometimes do before, I like to make a layer just at the very top, and I use that for highlights. So I can put in some highlights with this, with pure white, just in the eyes. I like to keep them small. Get some highlights in there. Okay, so now let's put in the flats. So the first thing I do is I usually fill in the eye color, because and I like to use a turnip pen for this, because the eyes don't have a border, right? So when I put this in, I want to select these areas, and then I hit Alt backspace, or I guess Option for Mac, I'm not sure exactly, but what it does is it just fills with foreground color. So now I have the eyes in, and then like that's usually the only part I really have to worry about drawing in. So I just draw the outlines. In Procreate you can't just, like here I can just draw a thing, select it and fill. In Procreate it's not that easy. It'll only it'll only fill like this area that's got that's on the reference layer. But anyway, that's one of the downsides to Procreate, or the advantages to Clip Studio, is you can just sort of outline areas and then fill. So we've got that, and then I just do it on layers. So this is the top layer. I'll make a layer beneath, and so whatever I have, I can select this area and then fill it. But I generally like to use the lasso, and I hold down Shift and then I select around. But I don't need to worry about this white part at all, because the layer above it is gonna make sure that it all stays the right color. So I look for little areas here. For instance, see here where it didn't get captured, and I use the lasso, hold Shift and just select around those areas. And then I fill, and there, her face is in. I just go around selecting all the areas. See, there's some line here. Didn't mean for that to be there. So I can go ahead and erase that. And the colors look weird for now. Like her face looks really blue. That's not a problem. It just looks that way because it's compared to white, and all the other colors aren't in place. But when all the colors are in place, it won't look like that at all. It won't look wrong. It'll look fine. Okay, just want to make sure I'm on the right layer. Sometimes I end up on the wrong layer. This part bothering me. This line here. Want to erase it. There. All right, so back to filling in colors. And this part, I mean, in Clip Studio anyway, it goes pretty fast. In Procreate, it does take quite a while. It's quite boring. It's just about selecting areas and then filling them. All right, so the skin's done. Can make a layer beneath. Fill in the next stuffs. So these eyes. Can I resort to lasso whenever I need to get details in? Get those in. And now if I just see how there's like all these little lines everywhere, well, I can just take my pen and just do this and fill it in. It's gonna be fine because we're on, like, the other parts are on a layer above, so none of it shows. If I hid those, you can see what it really looks like, but we don't have to get that problem. So that, and then the hair is this and this. And I can, you know, even select outside, and it's only going to stay within the figure because, again, it's all clipped down. So all of that, all of that, all of that. Fill. And missed a spot there, so I just fill that in. Cheat tattoos, the color of her shaved head. So again, I've just memorized all these colors. That's why it's easy for me to put them in. Just drawing it so many times that you learn what every color is and where it goes. You also start to learn where the colors aren't gonna be filled exactly. Like anywhere where there's like these areas where there's a bunch of lines, you might get things that aren't filled. Okay, so for the shoes, after a while I end up with a bunch of layers, and what I can do is just kind of start to merge them, so everything is on one layer, or two layers, I guess. Almost done. So I did make the character design simple on purpose. One, because it looks better. It's easy to remember, and the other reason because it's fast to just like get stuff in to do these coloring things. See little areas where it didn't fill, and then and then all that's left is this. So it's very easy. Once you get to the last color that needs to be filled, you just select around it and fill. So there, we got her. The background now, I can make this yellow color if I want. I tend to make it this yellow color because it makes the character stand out. And then just throw on the multiply layer, and there we go. So that's how I color a character and ink a character and draw a character in Space Wishers K. So yeah, I hope this taught you something, especially, I mean, the part that I used to struggle with a lot was the initial, inking, but also the initial layering the sketch. Like I tried to draw in the beginning a sketch, but I'd draw on a white page and I wouldn't get the general shapes down. And it was much harder to imagine a figure and to keep them consistent than it is to constantly adjust. And I also had a bit of a thing where I didn't feel right doing transform tools. I felt like, no, I should erase and redraw. And I mean, that's a bit of a luxury and it's a bit of an unnecessary thing to do in a way, because I mean, you can just transform stuff. So building up skill is fine, but it also is nice to just get things done quickly as well. Here I'm just making, I just clicked with a pen to make a circle, and I'm just gonna make a shadow for her. Tends to make a difference when there's just a little ground shadow. It kind of connects the figure and the background, makes it so they're not just floating. So for that reason, I like to do it. Kind of completes the image. All right, so I hope this helped, and thanks for watching.